I'm Shannon,
And I'm Mark.
and this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we will be discussing California new laws and double voting in D.C.
That's what Bidenomics is, double voting.
Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine first Thursday in 2024?
I was going to say, how many days removed are we from New Year's Eve?
What, 5 days ago? 4 or 5 days ago?
Well, I'm finally sobered up. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't drink. I'm good.
Glad to hear it.
Yes. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for asking.
Good.
Interesting way to begin our new year. Here in California, we have 800 and something new laws. They start to go into effect this year.
Only 800 and something?
Yeah. How many do you need? Apparently California thinks it's never enough, so we always get more.
Well, I think we've talked about this in the past, and it would be okay if some of the laws or a majority of the laws were replaced one for one. Or if they looked at a law and it really didn't serve its purpose and they removed it to institute a law that actually works, I'm all in. But since they keep stacking laws and rules on top of Californians, I'm not okay with it. There's especially some that are contrary to the U.S. Constitution that I'm not okay with.
Yeah, so some of the new laws that we now have going into effect include a $20 an hour minimum wage for fast food workers. And in the new year, what do we get? Pizza Hut laying off 1,200 drivers.
What is the saying? Cause and effect. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
And here we have the minimum wage law affecting how many jobs people have in fast food. Another one that we have as far as California's new law, we have a gun law that has gone into effect. Originally, a judge had issued a stay, but the Ninth Circuit had decided to reinstitute it. So it is now illegal to carry a gun, a concealed weapon, of which a person has a valid permit for. It's illegal in so many more locations, it makes it practically impossible to carry one. For instance, it used to be that if you were going to drink alcohol, you were not allowed to carry your gun, your CCW authorized gun.
Makes sense.
Now you are not allowed to go into an establishment with a liquor license, regardless of whether or not you're going to drink. In addition, if said establishment shares a parking lot with an establishment that it would be legal for you to go into, you're not allowed to go into that other establishment because the law covers the parking lot itself. So now you have locations that are co-shared with parking lots that have now become illegal.
Isn't it interesting that governments are bent on punishing law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, but people that break the law, that don't believe in laws, can get away with just about anything?
They make it easier, and they make zero punishment or very, very limited punishment, if any.
So I wonder if there was a study that said, yes, we have an issue with concealed carry folks in California. They're running amok. They're like the old Western days, and they're going around shooting each other. They're very untrained. Oh, wait a minute. Most of the concealed carry people are as trained as normal law enforcement.
Yes, and now one of the other laws that went into play is that you have to be twice as trained as you were before. So instead of 8 hours for your initial CCW, it is 16. And in order to get recertified, instead of 4, it is now 8. So if they found that education was lacking for permit holders, then this should be the fix to their problem, not banning them from going to any location. But it's just, as you said, to circumvent the Second Amendment.
While folks like Gavin Newsom are surrounded by law enforcement or private security or concealed carry people, I would guarantee you that a lot of his family members have concealed carry. And I wish that people or an expert would dive into that to see how many of them do and how many of them are going to break the law here in the near future.
Oh, you mean, well, we have the first son. He did not have a CCW as far as I understand, but he did unlawfully obtain a weapon. And over they thought in Corinne Jean-Pierre and others speaking on behalf of the president, that it was a political hit job for them to go after Hunter Biden for his illegal procurement of a gun. It's just political. It's just political. We heard it over and over. They're only going after it to hurt Joe Biden instead of, hey, we had somebody do something unlawfully and continue to live an unlawful lifestyle. Yes, of course, he deserves to be prosecuted and the jury will decide.
Correct.
The
and
courts will decide.
What's surrounding him right now?
And he gets to be protected.
Secret Service protection. And I don't know how long after Biden's out of office.
For the kids or the family members.
The kids, the grandkids, how long they will continue to be afforded.
I wonder if it's lifetime.
Potentially.
Because technically they're close to...
It's, it's law after law that these people think that they're doing us justice, when they're most of the lawbreakers. They're the ones that cheat on their investments. They're the ones that have insider information. They're the ones that I like to say in the real world, but apparently we've been around a long time, so this is the real world. They get away with things that they should not. If they're going to create the laws, they need to enforce and be part of the same laws we're part of. If they're going to be in Congress or the Senate, and I'm going to bounce between them and back to the state, one and done, one term and done. The governor's office in California, one term and done. And not be afforded the ability to commute sentences or any of that. What is that? That's like...
saying that committing the crime is acceptable.
Is acceptable. And if you show good faith and you vote one way or the other, potentially will let you out of jail with a get out of jail free card.
And we have people who are being let out early who unfortunately turn around and commit new crimes.
Yeah, that thing's called a very high recidivism rate, because when bad permeates into somebody's condition or the human condition, very few are able to get back out of that role. They get so used to criminalizing others or stealing from others or just being a plain hateful and discontentful person. Giving them a get out of jail free card does not fix the problem.
So another thing that we see with prosecutions, it's not necessarily new laws, but the lack of enforcement of some of the laws that we have, is that somebody high enough up will commit a crime and they wait so long to go after them, as we saw with Hunter Biden, that the statute of limitations runs out. But another thing we see is that they just don't prosecute for some reason. They just choose not to prosecute, or they'll half prosecute. Again, picking on Hunter Biden, I guess, we saw that they attempted to give him a free pass by his pleading guilty to lesser charges. That didn't go his way, so then they finally actually indicted him. But Sam Bankman-Fried will not face trial on illegal political donations. So he got in trouble for running his little Ponzi scheme and backdooring money out to himself. But when it comes to his illegal political donations, why do you think that they're not going after him?
Because one political party or the other needs protection, or both.
And who do you think he routinely donated to?
Well, it's a proven fact. Empirical data says the Democrats.
Yes, and it wasn't 100%, but it was in the high 90s.
95 out of 100.
That he donated to left-leaning causes or left-leaning people. So if they were to go after him for illegal political contributions, that would mean they have to go after the politicians that received the illegal contribution, should they have known that the contributions were illegal. But the other thing that had happened when this guy got arrested was a lot of these politicians said that when they accepted the money, they accepted it in good faith, so they weren't going to give it back. Well, if we're now saying that there really is illegal political contributions and they may have enough evidence to charge him and take him to court, do the whole trial again, now they're saying that they're just not going to do it. It doesn't benefit society to have this second trial against him.
Of course not. Now what's going to happen is he's going to get Epsteined in prison. If he ever does go to prison, or he'll be out in public and he'll get hit by a car, a bird will fall out of the sky and break his neck. Something will happen, because there's obviously a pattern here when these corrupt dudes and women in D.C. get caught by one of their surrogates doing something. They come at you full force to make sure they're well protected and everybody around them gets penalized. Let's bounce back to this California law real quick with concealed carry. See, this is their mindset, and they being our governor and the ring around him. This ruling of the court will allow our common sense gun laws to remain in place while we appeal the district court's dangerous ruling. Newsom posted to X, formerly Twitter, after the appeals court acted Saturday, Californians overwhelmingly support efforts to ensure that places like hospitals, libraries, and children's playgrounds remain safe and free from guns. Well, the only guns that are ever in those places that are unsafe is criminals. The only guns that are safe are in highly trained CCW holders. So they think that this is a good do-gooder, touchy-feely situation. How well have they done with homeless?
They've done so well with the homeless situation that they've actually increased the number of homeless people.
Yes, and they've increased the amount of money that they're spending, and they're begging the federal government to send them. Okay, how have they done with rents in California?
Highly controlled, so controlled, in fact, that they have gone up.
And they're unaffordable by the everyday American, gun carrying and or otherwise. So that just goes right down the line. California's fuel tax laws.
We have increased the gas tax to such a rate that our roads now are near perfect.
So perfect, I drove down one today here where I live, and I could barely talk to my wife because my suspension was pounding me to death. And I made a comment about the video I had watched a few days previous of the celebration and the fireworks in Dubai, of all places, and how beautiful Dubai looks.
Well, that's rich oil money, and we don't like oil or money unless it's other people's. Then
Right.
we are all
And
about
we
it.
love it. That's why we're going to hire 80,000 new IRS agents, blah, blah, blah. We are so messed up in this country, and I know you've said it, and I've said it multiple times over the last year or two. This thing has spiraled out of control. I do not know if we can fix it. And when I say we, whomever we elect, because if you elect somebody that cares, then we have to find something wrong with that person. We have to find a character flaw. We have to find a deficit within their ability to run a country, because we can't have things go right. We can only have people that know how to steal your money, that know how to rape, pillage, and plunder the populace.
Just like Hamas did, which is why we have so many people, especially on college campuses and young Americans, who applaud what Hamas did. We like it. We appreciate it. So they are all out there wanting to have exactly what they have. By the way, we say that money is the answer to everything. Sorry for that little side statement, but we say money is the answer to all of our woes. So what has money gotten us? As I kind of alluded to, money, more of your tax dollars to the roadway has gotten us roads that are worse. Increasing our PG&E bills and increasing rooftop solar, which both of those things we were told would fix all of our problems. We've been told that it's not enough and they want more. Increasing our funding to solve the homeless crisis has only led to more people being homeless and more money being begged for because it's never enough. What do we say at the border? Same thing, except in reverse. We invited people to cross the border and they took us up on it. And now all of these cities that have said they want open borders and they are here to be the welcoming army for the United States have found out that, guess what? There is not enough money in their cities. So they want more money for their cities for a border crisis that doesn't exist at this point. We've been told over and over again that Bidenomics has fixed all of our problems. And if Republicans would just admit how great it is, there would be no need to look any further into the Biden crime family, because all we have to do is see how wonderfully he's done for the country. And I kind of jumped a little bit there. But there is never enough of other people's money. And if only they would give more, those evil people that have that money, all of our problems would be solved.
Even if they took 100%, they could not fix what they have broken, because they're not the folks to fix things. They're the folks that break things, and then they say that
they are the solution.
And they are not.
And you have... Well, money being the solution, we now have a representative out of Florida. She's a Democrat. The House Committee on Ethics has announced an investigative subcommittee probe into allegations that she has used taxpayer money unlawfully. So we have the very people that are elected to do us the most good. We have more and more of them getting investigated. I will say that I'm surprised that they're investigating a Democrat, but this is out of the House, and right now Republicans hold the majority. So maybe I shouldn't be that surprised, but it should not take a Republican majority to look into Democrat, or a Democrat majority to look into a Republican. Everybody should say what is best for America.
Yeah, they're supposed to be the example setters. That's why we hire them. They're supposed to be the best of the best. And unfortunately, they are not. They're the middle of the road at best. And I think it's about time that all us middle of the road to lower middle of the roaders wake up and start electing people that can actually run things and are actually educated in the right areas to actually do us justice with our hard-earned money that we send to them on a monthly basis. We need to take people like Biden and his Bidenomics and send him on his merry way here in about a year or whatever amount of days are left before the election. And that's another thing that needs to happen, in my opinion. Quick sidebar is we need to push back towards the English way of doing part of the election is they don't go for 2 years. So we listen to ads and they get to spend all this corporate money on all this. They need to be given a block of time, an amount of money, whatever the taxpayers give them in money, they can match that for their commercials and their traveling, and that's it. None of this U.S. senators running for office in the state of Texas and spending almost $1 billion for an election.
Yeah, so we're kind of jumping a bit all over the place. There's been a lot that has come down with the new laws, the way money has been working, and the things that we're seeing. So pardon our jumping, and I hope you're ready to go on this ride with us. Something that just came up, and I think that it's really important that we think about where our money's going and who gets to influence what and how long they get to go on their little campaign trails for. Lauren Boebert out of Colorado has kind of issued a complaint that big money is coming into her small jurisdiction to try and oust her. And we're talking about from people in Hollywood. And I'm of the belief that you should be allowed to represent your local population, however big that is. because we break down all of the jurisdiction and each state gets so many representatives in the House, that even if, for instance, we talked about Nancy Pelosi in the past, I disagree with her, I don't like her, I think she's terrible for the state of California and the country, but she represents her area and the people of her area want her. At least that's what it appears. So if the people in Colorado want Lauren Boebert, they should get her, and they shouldn't get these Hollywood elitists or these big money people, George Soros backed people. They should not have to go up against money that is so big, as you just said, $1 billion out of Texas, out of state money, out of town money, out of jurisdiction money. It should be, you can donate money if the person has the ability to represent you. So I should not be donating money to someone who's running up in San Francisco. I should not be donating money to someone who's running out of Los Angeles, who is going for mayor, who is going for any of these other offices. It should be someone who can represent my jurisdiction. All of this out of town money, out of state money, that just makes these elections go into the ultra millions, if not billions. That should show all of us that we have too much, that some of these elitists have too much influence, and it should be stopped.
Yes, and that's why it's called local politics and local elections. Not the little mayor of Clovis, California is supported by the big mayor in New York or the big mayor in Texas. It should stay local. And yes, I am bouncing all over the place because I'm looking at all these articles. Everything ties together because there's one common denominator. It's money, and it's big corporations, and it's especially Soros, like you said, that's trying to drive the narrative and take control of everything we do. Well, they're taking control of everything we do is making a lot of our lives pretty miserable.
Yes.
And because they are so big with their money and we are so small, we can't get anything done.
And we can't compete with that. We can't. Lauren Boebert, in her jurisdiction, if she only got dollars, if she only got the minimum, or the maximum number of dollars, and not everyone will donate, they can't, the maximum number of dollars, but $1,500 per every person in her jurisdiction to give her money. She cannot compete if it's with the rest of the country. I'm not saying she's my cup of tea, but if she's the cup of tea for the local constituents, she's the cup of tea for the local constituents. Sometimes what works in Tennessee or what works in Texas or what works in Colorado doesn't work for somebody out in California. But it doesn't mean that California should be influencing Colorado elections. It doesn't mean that Texas should be influencing Colorado elections.
And that would be just like when Barack Obama was in office and his State Department was trying to influence the election in Israel.
Same. We should not be influencing internationally. We can have friends. We can work with people. We can have compatriots. But when we try to take over other cities, states, the countries, we have a problem.
Yes, and we have a multi-billion-dollar or trillion-dollar deficit. That's what happens. We have all this money to spend on these elections. We have all this cash to send to the European theater for war, or the Middle Eastern theater for war, or just giving money to terrorists like Hamas, or giving money to just the Palestinian Authority. It takes from our ability to legitimately have money in our coffers. That's why I'm not saying California donates or gives money to these organizations, but that's why they're running, or we are running, a deficit again. I mean, there's enough people in this state and there's enough tax revenue. We should be living high on the hog all the time.
Well, we should be living high on the hog, but the problem is they're so high up there in Sacramento that they want every pie in the sky, left-leaning ideal to be put into practice regardless of what is going on as outcomes of those practices. For instance, one of the new pie in the sky ideals is that every illegal immigrant in the state of California will now have taxpayer funded health insurance. It's a first in the nation policy. We have a $68 billion deficit with all of our pie in the sky. That's 1/3 of our budget. A $68 billion deficit, but yet it's never enough. And if only the rich elitists would pay more, because that's going to always fix all of our problems, even though they're spending like drunken sailors. We are going to see Americans and lawful permanent residents here in the state of California get scrooged over. They still have to pay for their own health insurance. But if you're unlawfully residing anywhere in the United States, guess what? Come to California, your health insurance is covered. Freebie, thanks to the taxpayers.
Thanks to somebody who has aspirations of wanting to run for president someday, so he thinks that he does that and he'll have California locked down with 100% of the vote. And it's not going to happen, because I think that people are going to see through him, because he's a fraud. But unfortunately, a lot of frauds get elected on a regular basis. Look at him. He got elected to governorship twice.
Technically 3 times if you want to count the time that we tried to boot him out of office and he still won that.
Yes,
it's not a re-election, but
right.
It's basically affirmed 3 times.
And he was the mayor of San Francisco?
Yes, mayor of San Francisco, who had a 10-year plan to end homelessness, and we're at year 20.
Well, the way you do that is when a Chinese leader gets ready to show up, you just have your federal government take garden hoses there and mops and brooms, and you just sweep the problem away. And 1 week after the Chinese leader leaves, the problem's back. So what a fantastic job.
Yes, an absolutely wonderful job that we see here in the state of California. We want the rest of the nation to go down in a fireball of flames with us. Going back to Bidenomics, one of the things this past week that Karine Jean-Pierre said was, when asked about some of the slightly illegal happenings surrounding the Biden family, she said that her and Nancy Pelosi stuck together on this, that basically because the economy is doing so well and Bidenomics is working, the Republicans don't want to talk about that, so they're trying to bring up anything and everything they possibly can. So if they would just admit that Bidenomics is working, we just have this kind of kumbaya moment. So I want to say, for the sake of argument, let's admit that Bidenomics is working, just for the sake of argument. Can't it also be true that Hunter Biden's committing crimes?
Yes, it can be.
Can't it also be true that Hunter Biden was giving 10% to the big guy?
Yes, it can be.
Can't it also be true that Joe Biden's brother has been sending money his way that wasn't really a loan repayment?
Yes, it can be.
So even if Bidenomics is working, what does it matter if he's still a criminal? And I say that because if somebody is a really bad dude, but they've done really good things, do we just always overlook all of the bad stuff that they did because they did other good stuff? Is that the way we work?
Some do. Is that the way you're supposed to look at Hitler?
Is that the way it's supposed to work? So if I'm a mass murderer, but I donated $1 billion to different children's hospitals for them to get needed surgeries that they couldn't pay for, so I did something really good, should we just say that those things cancel each other out?
Absolutely.
Because it seems to be what they're saying. Well, Bidenomics is working. Okay, so let's just say, for argument's sake, it is. Can't everything else be looked into? I guess not. I guess it's not the way. But for Bidenomics to be working, have you thought about how well it's working? For instance, mortgage payments. Since Biden has been elected to office, how do you think we've been doing for mortgage payments? Do you think they've gone up or gone down?
I would say, based on what I hear and see, they've gone up quite a bit.
So the average monthly payment leading up to Joe Biden getting elected stood at $1,746 a month. So that would be monthly. So the average monthly payment, $1,746. $746. Present data has revealed a 90% surge in those payments, and the current average monthly payment on a new home is $3,322. So would you say that we're doing better?
I would say that Biden's doing better. Bidenomics are doing very well. I would say the person that ended up having to get that mortgage is not. Of course not. We're not doing better under this Bidenomic plan. But their plan is not to make things easier for you. Their plan is to raise prices like they've done, bring in illegals like they've done, cause total mayhem, and then 1 year, 6 months prior to the election, the prices will go down even if they're still higher than they were prior to them coming into office. We have such short memories that people will look at it and go, "Woo, everything's down. What a great job he's doing.
My eggs are a little bit cheaper. My
Yes.
gas is cheaper than it was last summer. So, hey, it's all good."
Same cycle we go through every 4, 8, 12, 16 years.
So if you sell an item, let's say an iPhone, and it costs $1,000, and then we have inflation, the cost of business goes up, and now you sell that same iPhone and it costs $2,000. Our GDP appears healthier, but you're only selling the same number of items. It's just that they cost more. So do you think that maybe it's also a way to make our GDP look better?
Yes.
But we're not healthier. We're not better. But it's a way to make it look better.
And that was, I believe, Ronald Reagan's statement years ago. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And I would say no, 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 no.
And speaking of Biden's border crisis, things that are going on there, did you know that 15 states have smaller populations than the total illegal southern border crossing in 2023?
I do believe that.
And we've talked before about absorbing, right? And that can we just absorb? If we had 330 million people cross this year, 2024, could we just absorb that?
No.
We don't have the infrastructure.
We do not.
We don't. We definitely, we don't have the housing. We don't have the infrastructure. And what are you doing? If you cross illegally right now, we're giving thousands of dollars. We're giving housing. We're giving food. We're helping to relocate. We're doing all of this stuff for people who made the choice to unlawfully come and reside here. But what happens if you lawfully decide to come and reside here? You actually have to prove that you have money. You have to prove that you have a place to go, that that person will take care of you until such a time you can get on your own feet.
You know what I see more when people come here legally and they work hard like that to become a U.S. citizen or to live here? They appreciate it more and they want to blend into the American way of life. When you come up here illegally and you're given free stuff, I tend to see more of them, and it's from all different countries, wanting to bring the crap that they left here and live like that and live under those rules and policies and not want to assimilate into the American way of life. That's how you become fractured like the Middle East and Iran and Iraq, where there's a dozen different tribes per se, and nobody gets along.
So that's something I think that people don't give enough thought to, is assimilation. So we have a lot of this mindset of very independentness, and we've talked about the unhealthiness of that before too on this podcast, where if we are all about ourselves, me, as a society, we start to fracture. Things just don't function. If the person who is supposed to be your pilot to shuttle you from A to B decides, never mind, I just don't want to work today, are you happy that your flight got canceled?
No.
And I understand it's a job, and we all take on jobs and get paid for those jobs. But if we have no melting pot of ideas and understanding and cohesiveness, we will fracture and fall apart as a society. Now, the United States is already a melting pot, so we have kind of made a new culture. We come from all over the world, all of us. My family history, even though it is in part German from Russia, we have English background, And you can look into my family history and you will see, I can say I'm English, or I can say I'm a German from Russia, or I can say I'm keep going back farther and farther in family history. But if you go to Russia along the Volga River and you see me and you see a real German who lives there, who really came from Germany and resided in Russia, we don't have the same culture. I no longer have the same culture of a person from England, even though my family history can be traced there. So I have taken on, being born here in America, I have taken on this culture. And while we may have some ever-changing facts about our culture, we really do have a culture. And it can also be regional. What goes on in Texas and what goes on in California will seem vastly different. New England states will seem very different, but we do have a culture here. Now, if somebody, day one, says where I come from, we eat horses. I see you have a horse in your pasture. You're not eating it. I am going to kill it and eat it. But don't worry, since I killed it, I will package it and give you your horse back, and you can have some meat too. But that's okay in my country. Are you going to accept that?
Nope.
Are you going to accept, well, where I come from, we have honor killings, and my daughter dishonored our family, so it's okay for me to kill her. She brought dishonor. Are you going to accept that?
No.
So we really do have a culture. We really do have laws. Now, some people may be deciding they don't like the laws here in the United States, but we don't give enough thought into what happens if an entire group from a country that does something completely different from the United States suddenly became your next door neighbor and refused to assimilate into American culture.
Right, then who's the one that should move? You or them? Should you pack up your house and move because you have a next door neighbor now that is living the lifestyle they lived from the country they're from? Or do you somehow modify their behavior and make them capitulate and conform and act like a U.S. citizen and not like a fill in the blank?
And something to consider about immigrating to the United States, when you legally immigrate, you are considered an intending immigrant. You intend to immigrate. And then also, you are intending to become a United States citizen. Now, there are some people who all they want to do is come here, work, send the money home. When they're done, they want to go back to their home country. Should they be allowed to do that?
I would say no, with a caveat. If the corporation or the company they're working for is okay with that, that would be like a...
But they would have abused the visa that they came on.
Negative. Then that's a 100% no.
So if we had visas that said, hey, this is an economic migrants visa. If all you want to do is come here, work here, send money home, and then go home, maybe we don't have an economics migrant visa. I'm just trying to say, okay, if that's what we have and this is what we want, because all the time we hear we don't have enough workers, right? So if that's what we have and that's what we want, why not have an economic migrant visa?
Right, and I think there was something similar to that back in the day. Wasn't that the Basario program?
And it was specific to agriculture, if I'm not mistaken. So we can have a just economic migrant. You can have any job you want as long as you meet the requirements for that job.
Well, we've talked about that before, because that in turn, though, takes too much money out of a local economy, because you're expecting that person to work and pay the same rate of taxes and such as the Americans or the people that have already been living there for years. But when they send home 80 or 90% of their income, it's not helping. It's helping a very minute amount, but it's really not doing what it should do, which is pump money into the economy for the roads, for the homeless, for the fuel, just check all the boxes.
And to go further into that, something that has happened, that I've even seen this happen when I used to work for immigration, seeing the paperwork and meeting the people who participated. So what you'll have is you'll have somebody come over and they'll be an H-1B. They have a bachelor's degree equivalent or higher. and they will come to say work in the tech field, get a job. They will find the other H-1Bs in the area, and they will all share a house together because the intention is to work here, and not all of them are intending to stay here and make their whole life here. They're making good money and they're going to send it home. They're making better money than they would if they were in, say, India, but they're willing to take lower wages than American workers because they're not living in a single family home as a, say, married couple with children. They are doing it as a single individual who is not intending to further their life here in the United States. So now you have many people living in a single family home. There is likely the tax payments on that house, property taxes, but that's as if they were a single family. So you have all of the people who would normally be paying taxes per unit are not, because again, same, they are with their cohabitation and their co-sharing, they are not paying as much in, say, road taxes. And with all of that sending home, they are not buying products here, so they're not paying the sales tax. They might go home twice a year. They will load up on what they want and bring it here to the United States. So they're not paying all of those extra taxes that we would normally see people pay. So there is a way that they exist in American society without paying the extras, and they're not intending to stay here.
I understand that's big. A lot of that is really big with the Indian population that drives 18-wheelers. A lot of them will make money, save that money, and then go home for 6 or 7 months out of the year, or whatever the case may be, because they can live like kings and queens there, and then come back, wash, rinse, repeat.
Yes, and I even saw cases of people who illegally crossed the border. So they went from India to Mexico, and then Mexico, they illegally came up through the southern border. They have contacts, and they will stay with other Indian truck drivers. They'll have essentially like an airline flop house where a bunch of people live in a single place. They just have bunk houses there. And unfortunately, here in the Central Valley, they knew where to go to pay off somebody to get a truck driver license. And so we would see people who would present driver licenses out of Washington, the state of Washington, not DC. And then they would all have addresses out of Bakersfield. And that is because they had a DMV worker they were paying off in Bakersfield, and then they had one up in Washington. So we'd see both of those. It's like, wait, you've lived in California your whole time. Why are you presenting a license out of Washington? Oh, you say you live in Fresno, yet your address on your driver license, commercial driver license, says Bakersfield. Well, it turned out that they had people they were paying off. However, that's kind of a side issue. They were willing to commit other immigration violations and law violations until such a time they could find someone who would file paperwork for them. So oftentimes they would find somebody who was in need of money. They would get married, say they lived together, and then they would really have their true family back home in India that they were sending the money home to.
Well, we just have a full mishmash of corruption across the board, don't we? From bottom to top, top to bottom.
Yes, and so now we're seeing more and more people cross the southern border unlawfully. Please don't get me wrong. There is a lawful way to cross. If you are claiming asylum, you present yourself to CBP and you claim asylum. Absolutely. If you have a true claim to asylum, do it. Illegally crossing the border using coyotes, you're paying the cartel essentially to cross you in most cases. And if you're a woman, the likelihood that you will end up here in the United States without assault is seemingly non-existent. And then you'll have to go to work to pay off your debt. Even if you don't cross lawfully, you get caught, you'll do it again because you have a debt to the cartels.
And they want their payment.
But how many governors, how many mayors said, come, you're welcome. We love you. We'll embrace you. And now have changed their tune.
Every single one of them is whining like a little baby right now.
And they're all blaming Governor Abbott.
Well, he shouldn't charter an airplane that has 140 illegals. 140. Do you know how that tips the scale of a state the size of New York, bringing in 140 illegals?
Well, and then you have Biden saying you cannot protect yourself, you cannot protect the border, and you cannot stop people from crossing.
Oh, that's like the New York law. Don't protect yourself. Turn around and run.
So over this new year, we saw Biden vacation again. Speaking of Biden, speaking of borders, he crossed our border and went to another place,
Oh, he should go vacation
to an island
in Hawaii at Obama's place.
in the Caribbean. Yeah, he should go to Hawaii. They're used to having a president out there. But yes, he went to the same place in the Caribbean Sea that he went last year. So 2022, 2023, he picks the same place. It's a billionaire donor's house.
Beckman?
And is it Beckman?
Just kidding. Fried.
Haha. I was going to say it'd be funny if it was his place that he still had secretly.
Or a family member's place, his mommy or his daddy, who were big-time Democratic contributors.
Yes, but no. So these two billionaire individuals they rent their house on VRBO, but they give it to Biden for free. And he doesn't claim it on any ethics forms, or he doesn't claim it. He gets to take this vacation at his donor's house.
Is that a quid pro quo?
It's
a quid pro Joe?
It is a quid pro Joe.
I am amazed at how many people still focus on Trump and still hate his guts the way they do. Not only do they hate his guts, they hate all 50 to 70 million that voted for him. Even the band Green Day, who reworked a song for Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve, trashing the MAGA agenda. And again, as you and I have talked, what is the MAGA agenda?
Low taxes, no inappropriate material in the school library.
No wars.
No wars.
Trying to keep all of the prices that are up now down. So why, again, I ask you, is that a bad thing? What in this agenda is bad? The only thing in this agenda that's bad is these corrupt people that he was trying to weed out and get rid of. They were called the deep state. And now we know it's the deep, deep, deep state. Goes all the way to regular employees in D.C.
Yes, it does. And in fact, even with the Trump getting prosecuted, so should Trump be allowed to say that his prosecution is a political hit job?
Absolutely, he should.
Well, right now, Jack Smith is attempting he's asked the courts through his filings to bar Trump from saying that it has anything to do with politics. And they want to shape the way he's allowed to put up a defense in court. And then you have all of these people who seem to think that Biden can do no wrong, and Trump still breathing is a sign that he should not be allowed to exist anymore.
And Biden is such a corrupt individual and such corrupt family members that you can see right through it. And the news media outlets are doing their best to hide it, and we can still see it. And we're how many thousands of miles away from Washington, D.C., and the stench has made its way all the way to the Central Valley.
So what's something that we were told early in the pandemic about the Democrat Party versus the Republican Party, or the Democrats versus the MAGA stupid people? One of the things that I remember being told is that the Democrats are the party of science.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
They're the ones that are the party of science.
Okay, so over and over again, we've heard that they were the party of science. And so I'm finding this huge disconnect between what science says and what the narrative is. So climate is a number one fear of college students. They've gone around asking, what's your fear? What's your fear? What's your fear? So, and they repeatedly say climate.
For 1 second. If I could curse on this podcast, I'd say what these college students should be worried about is getting their ass kicked by a homeless person that has mental issues. Go ahead.
Probably. But anyway, so this fear, to me, and I think others are starting to see it too, but this fear that the party of science has instilled in a lot of these young college students is a way that they control every aspect of someone's life.
100%.
So we are seeing it in whether you should have children, what sacrifice you should make today, how you should have family relationships. I have seen this big disconnect. So we see it in climate and we see it in other areas, which I'll jump into, but just in talking about climate, if you say that climate change is not what they tell us it is, like if you point out the fact that Al Gore jet sets around, if you point out the fact that Bill Gates has multiple airplanes and he's flying all over the place, if you point out that Obama bought 2 houses that are at sea level, and so many things that we can keep pointing out. But if you point out these facts, you're a climate denier. The whole world is going to trash and you're the cause of it. And now we have a whole generation of kids that talk about how they're going to limit the number of children that they have because they don't want to negatively impact the climate. They're so scared of it. So what is this doing? This sees us put into practice electric grids, electric transit systems that aren't good for the local area. For instance, in Minnesota, they went with all electric, zero emission buses. We have talked about what happens to batteries in cold weather. I saw this. We live in Fresno, and I had an electric vehicle back in 2016 during the winter. My battery life, I could not get as far off the same battery charge in cold weather. Now you pick a place like Minnesota, which has even colder, a cold climate, and instead of 150 miles to a charge, they're seeing 70 to 75. They picked this bus and they were going to save the climate by going electric, but their actual climate, normal, natural climate in Minnesota can't handle it. So if you don't want gas, oil, you don't want natural gas, you can't do electric because you just spent all of this money and resources on a bus that will get you nowhere because you cannot, your area can't handle it.
That's why you and I have talked multiple times about this and how you need to diversify like you would your stock portfolio so you have a mix of all until the technology catches up with what your ultimate goal is.
So we are so dumb in America that we say this is the way of the future and we buy whole hook, line, and sinker into it. We've been so sold that we can't see past our 2 brain cells that are rubbing together because we've been told how to think for so long. Do you think this is going to change the agenda? Do you think that the students are going to see now that the buses don't run?
No, because what they're going to say to convince them is that this is an aberration, that it doesn't happen all the time, and that the permanent fix is just right around the corner, but we can't go backwards. We have to continue to drive forward, so to speak.
And over again, we are buying into things like that. And so in New York, it gets cold there too. Are they going to make every taxi go electric? Is their system, their grid going to be able to handle it?
It is not, especially since they're trying to do away with natural gas also, and they don't want anybody that owns a home or that cooks there or a restaurant that cooks with gas to cook with gas anymore. The governor or the mayor of New York? No, she's the governor.
Hochul.
Yes, she's trying to ban natural gas.
And here in the United States, as compared to other locations, that is actually one of our abundant resources. We have so much that just escapes from the earth that we could capture, and we don't. We let it go. We have so much of it. And even if we want to go forward with electric, and we've talked about those reasons, diversifying our portfolio saying we're going to do, whether it's a third, 50, 25, 25. Instead of doing that, we are going with all of our eggs in a single basket. And here in California, we're doing the same thing. Speaking of new laws, must have electric leaf blowers, must have electric yard tools. Everything now has, as of January 1st, 2024, your yard tools must be electric. So.
Well, so these brainiacs, and I've said it through a multitude of podcasts, they go to school, they build a model that they think will work. It works in theory, but it doesn't work in practical application. And I don't think they're ever going to learn, because narcissists and sociopaths continue to follow the same line. All of them. And until there's a dramatic loss of natural resources where they can't continue to destroy the earth and dig 1,000-foot deep holes to pull all this metal, these precious metals out to live their utopia, they're not going to stop. But at some point in time, the next group of brainiacs is going to look at these big holes and go, oh my God, what have we done? We had fossil fuels that we finally were able to get the emissions down to almost zero. And what happens when you run gas and that thing goes out the tailpipe? It goes away. It vaporizes into thin air. What happens when 200 million batteries go bad? Where do you put them? Oh, wait a minute. You have to put them in landfills because we don't have the technology to rebuild them. That's why we have miles and miles of propeller blades, so to speak, or windmill blades, because we built these things. We have this great idea, and guess what? It doesn't work. None of it works. This is not how any of this works. We need to unfriend all of them from our wall. Is that copyright infringement?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Party of Science has been doing a lot of unscientific things lately, but yet we're strong-armed into being told that you will believe this is science, or you're just a MAGA. And in fact, if you say, I don't believe you, or this doesn't sound very sound, you're just classified as a MAGA Republican, even if you're not Republican. The number of people who aren't Republican, that if they go against the grain, they're on the left, they're just classified as MAGA Republican. I don't have to talk to you. You no longer exist to me. You're not worthy of any conversation.
So how come we haven't come up with a catchphrase for the left, like lunatic left?
The loony left?
Yeah, the loony left. The people that have destroyed every fiber of American society. And I'm not talking about the old laws when we had slavery and all this other stuff. I'm talking about modern day 2024. You know, where's the loony left? Let's see, they're destroying people and creating homeless. More homeless than we've ever had in our history. And we don't have to run down the whole line of, you know, fuel prices and grocery prices and housing prices. And let's see, what else are they screwing up? Oh, wait a minute. They've been working on the environment now for how long? When did that guy first say we had a problem? 50 years ago. Guess what? Still not fixed. You know why? Because your crap doesn't work.
They don't actually want to fix it.
No, they don't want to fix it. What they want to do is come up with carbon credits so they can jet set around. They can buy their own fancy stuff and say, well, I gave them a $100,000 check so I could run around the earth 15 times on jet fuel. It's such a pathetic thing. They're lost, and we're letting our youth follow right in their footsteps.
They're following the laws, but George Soros, Bill Gates, and Jeff Bezos and others like them, they all have the influence, and the influence just cyclically continues because we have leadership in schools who are influenced by those types of people, and they continue that bad influence. You have governors and other elected officials who are so affected by the money that gets put in their account that they are willing to vote against the people's interest because of who's giving them the dollars, the big money donors. So, hey, if we take away those big money donors, we say no more super PACs, no more special interests, can't do any of that. You only have a set number of dollars. You have a set time frame, maybe 3 months. Campaign, and done. We need to stop with this influence, especially the Soros influence. Speaking of money going across the country, he influences across the world.
Yes, and he was also convicted of insider trading in France in 2002, by the way.
Oh, so we have a convict who's influencing a lot of left-leaning ideals, huh?
Yes, and according to reporters other than me, because I'm not a reporter, Soros comes from an anti-Semitic Jewish family, and even though he was a Nazi survivor, was a Nazi collaborator. He basically funds leftist mainstream to try to push a shadow party agenda.
So let's talk about voting. So we've talked about the money influence.
Illegal and or otherwise.
Yes, let's talk about voting. A D.C. official has been charged with voter fraud. She, among others.
Another one?
What they have done is they double voted. They voted in both D.C. and Maryland. So the D.C. official, elected official, mind you, claimed that she thought she could do both because D.C. is not a state. So she was registered both in D.C. and in Maryland. And I'm just wondering, so she represents an advisory neighborhood. She is an advisory neighborhood commissioner in Ward 4. And by the way, she voted in the 2020 general election this way. And then so what I don't get is you have to say where you live. In order to be DC, you have to live in DC. In order to be Maryland, you have to be Maryland. It is my understanding that you have to live in your jurisdiction to vote. So can you say that you didn't know that you weren't allowed to vote twice because DC is not a state?
No. Cheating's cheating. And if Bidenomics and all these other Democratic policies are so good, why would you need to cheat to win?
Right? You don't need to cheat to win, but apparently we do. And they have a record of this gal and 5 others double voting. And DC, I believe, is allowed to vote for president. So do you think that she only voted for president in one of those jurisdictions?
Nope. But see, that's a small number. It's a very small sample, so it's inconsequential. That happens all the time, all over the country, but it's not enough to make a difference in the election. But we saw a court case where
one did make a difference.
One made the difference.
Yes, so in this case, this is just what the ones that they found. Who knows how many they don't actually find? And who knows how many are, folks at the rest home who have no cognitive abilities anymore, who are getting their votes made for them. Because that was another thing that was being seen as address being of not retirement homes, because when you're retired, it doesn't mean you don't have all your faculties there. You just choose to live in a nice little community. But if you're in a rest home or a hospice, etc., do you think you have your full faculties to be voting? Probably not.
No. Here's what I'd be doing right now, though, if I was part of the Republican Party that actually set up voting districts. And a lot of folks that always use the excuse that, well, you guys are disenfranchising them, asking them to show ID because they can't get down to the polling place. I would right now start setting up transit buses, private buses, 19-passenger vans, whatever it took to get these folks ready to go to the polling place. Every one of them. Say, okay, in this county there's 10,000 outliers that can't make it to vote. Well, I'm going to set it up so at least 90% of them can go vote. I'm not going to let them vote absentee. I'm not going to let them do a mail-in ballot because that is hogwash. That's where all this corruption's coming from, is from the absentee and the ballot harvesting and sending things out 30 and 60 days prior to the election. We need to stop that. and go back to you vote the day of the election only, period. And if you don't have a driver's license, if you don't have a state ID for the state you live in, or some extraordinary mitigating reason that you've lost your ID, you don't vote.
What if IDs were free? I know that's a weird concept here in the state of California because our costs for IDs have just gone up and up and up. But what if for everyone, regardless of your status, an ID was free? Everyone gets an ID.
Well, and they should be if you're living in that state and you're working in that state and you're paying state income taxes and you're paying all these fees for everything you do. The least they could do is give you a free identification card to recognize that you live in the state. What a novel concept. Or if your income level is $15,000 or less, $20,000 or less, you get a free ID. Why not? We get free phones, so we don't personally.
Yeah, there's free phones. There's now going to be health care provided if you're illegally residing here.
There's WIC programs for pregnant mothers. There's
So one of the things that was told to me, sorry, you saying that reminded me, that in order to get those benefits, you have to present ID.
You have to have an ID card.
Oh,
what
that's
a novel
weird.
Concept. If they want to go to Las Vegas to party or to go see a show, they have to go through TSA showing what? An ID.
An identification.
And a valid ticket, plane ticket.
Yes. And so with that ID, it's got to be a picture ID.
So again, we show that one party over the other is full of bull.
Yeah, much like only Nancy Pelosi's husband is making the stock trades, and she doesn't talk to him ever about anything going on in Congress.
Never.
Doesn't give
They have never, in the 450 years that she's been in office, they have never once talked about an upcoming vote or a policy or a stock that's going to end. None of that. Never. Never has a week before they're getting ready to have a vote does he sell 10,000 shares of X.
Same with all of the other individuals there in Congress who happen to make excellent trades that benefit them, and they didn't lose their butts on them.
They're the ones that should be writing books and teaching all the other Americans that have simple lives and middle income jobs how to get a leg up on society and the American dream and make a little extra jingle.
So something that we were told would come January 1st, or at least starting January 1st, is that the court documents that name all the people that were Jeffrey Epstein's associates are supposed to be unsealed.
Yeah, they're going to unseal all the names except for the ones that are going to remain sealed.
So, and they said they're going to start doing it after January 1st. So something I thought that was interesting is the judge said, this doesn't need to be sealed anymore. So why didn't they unseal it right away? Why was it a future date that they were going to unseal it?
Because they've been able to put that software or that right into a right program, that document, and they were able to manipulate it and adjust it and get it to look and read the way they want it to. Just like the word is on the street that Bill Clinton is all over this thing. And they're going to say, oh, yeah, of course he is. He was a president, and Epstein was a businessman, and he was looking for donations. They were looking to make Harvard a better place, on and on and on. They will have 100 excuses for one thing.
I was going to say, is it because they had to get their story?
Yes, they all had to get their stories in line. And that's why they say that some of the underaged people are going to be left out of there. Well, they were all underaged at the time, the women, from what I understand.
They were either underage or they were a true victim. Like, even if they were of age, they were abused into a non-consenting situation.
So if we still want the truth and we want to see how to fix this in the future, so when you have an executive or a wealthy guy that's following the same pattern, they know how to stop it and what to look for.
And I thought we believed all women.
Supposed to.
Yeah, we had the ones that did come forward. I'm not saying a victim has to come forward. I don't. And be public. Obviously, if the victim wants to come forward and still remain Jane Doe, they can. But we had victims come forward, and for some reason, they just were not believed.
because it was against their heroes. Just like Paula Jones and Jennifer Flowers and all the ones that not the sheriffs, what were they called? State troopers in Arkansas were there for all the stuff Bill Clinton did. And they came forward and none of them were believed, not a one. Even though the troopers that were guarding him when he was a governor were the ones that actually took these women to the hotels. So they knew what they knew.
Right. And then you have, how many times too do we hear about cases of abuse where a boss abuses their position with a subordinate?
Lots.
And is that acceptable
No.
even if both are adults?
No, it is not.
So it's not acceptable if a boss abuses their position. So one of the things that I remember from Bill Clinton's time in the Oval Office is that he did not get made fun of and torn down on late night television. It was Monica Lewinsky. She got verbally abused up, right, down, left, center. It was like a funny situation, and she was the stupid girl who fell for it. No, I mean zero offense, Monica Lewinsky. If you hear this, I have great respect for you. What I'm getting at is he was in the ultimate power position, or the ultimate position of power. He was the abusive boss. She was an intern. He abused his position as her boss. And yet you will get calls for Bill Clinton all day long. How much can we pay you to come speak at our event? Oh, how much can we pay you to come speak at our event on women's issues? How much can we pay you to come speak at, and then insert whatever other. He did not get the kind of abuse that she got, and he was in the position of power, but somehow that's also forgotten.
That's the way that whole narcissistic society works back there, unfortunately. And he is not the only one. There's a lot of them back there, and there's a lot of corporate executives that do that on a daily basis worldwide. Probably some of the worst, from what I've read, is unfortunately a lot of them in the Middle East, because they think of women in a lesser light than they do in America and other countries. They're really treated poorly in some areas of the world.
Absolutely. And going back to our conversation from earlier, how many times have we heard of people who do not wish to assimilate into American culture abusing women, and not just American culture, abusing English women, abusing German women, abusing other women in places that they exist in the world, kind of like the Western culture, because they were not conforming to where that person came from.
A lot. And I guess one of the groups that has migrated over here lives in either Michigan or somewhere back in that area, that almost to a man, they don't follow U.S. law. And a lot of them have been elected into local politics, and they run it tribally like they did in the countries they were from.
And it's been a couple years now, and it was in the Midwest. I believe it was the Midwest, where they were attempting to implement Sharia law to coexist with American law. And they were saying that they will apply Sharia to those that it applies to, and then they'll apply American law to those that it applies to, kind of saying that a woman or a man could lose their rights as an American citizen if they are also Muslim, because Sharia law could get applied to them.
What they were saying is, like, Fed trumps state. They were trying to say that Sharia law trumps U.S. law. Basically. In certain cases, and that was either in Minnesota or Michigan. And then that is interesting because we now have, from what I've seen on the news, Chinese police stations around the U.S.
Inside the United States, yes.
And they're trying to influence and belittle and push around immigrants that have come over from China.
Yes, and so something that they're doing is if they find a Chinese citizen, so assuming they still have citizenship in China and they are here as a immigrant, or even one that has become a citizen here in the United States, but they were born in China, if they speak out against the government in China, these secret Chinese police stations are going and essentially kidnapping these individuals and forcefully showing them how wrong they are for speaking out against China.
Amazing, isn't it?
Quite amazing.
So let's start the Food Network now. A little healthy food advice.
What is your healthy food advice?
A lot of people don't like fish, and a lot of people do like fish. I happen to love to eat seafood, all kinds. So a scientist says, and it's not me because I'm not a scientist, guys, but a real scientist, a real person that has done studies, and I always throw that empirical data thing out there. We won't use empirical data for this, but it's a legitimate study. If you eat salmon, do your level best to eat wild-caught salmon.
Not farm raised?
Not farm raised. And it's interesting to me, after I saw this study last night, is California, I believe, has banned red dye in certain
new
products.
Law.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the newer laws.
So
that might have been last year.
Farm raised, if you look at the coloration of the two, farm raised is bright red or bright pink, depending on how you look at it.
Yes.
Wild caught is not. That is all the dye that the farms inject in the water as they're raising these salmon. It is very unhealthy for you, and it causes down the road severe problems.
It's funny that you bring that up. I was doing our grocery shopping. I think it's been more than 6 months since I remember seeing specifically fish. I was at a local grocery store, and when I was looking at the fish, the one that was dyed caught my eye because that looked like a bright, healthy fish. And I was looking it over. I was looking at the price. I was looking at the price of the other fish and was just kind of going back and forth. Which one should I get? When I saw on there, I don't remember the exact verbiage used, but essentially this fish is dyed to look this way.
Yes.
Whoa.
And that's why it's done.
What am I eating?
Yes.
What am I eating? I thought visually that's why they do it, right? Because it looks
Yes, and when you look at meat, we'll just pick one type of steak, a sirloin. When you see one that looks good and pink and healthy looking, you know it's pretty fresh. The date on it looks good. So then you buy that one. Well, as they start to age, they start to get that brown tinge to them, which means they're starting to go bad. You probably don't want to eat it. That's the whole purpose, I believe, behind dyeing those, is to make them always look good. So people are going to look at the wild caught and go, oof,
that doesn't look good.
And and you look at this one, oh my God, this must be fresh. And that has to be some of the reasoning behind it. Go ahead. Side
story. I used to shop at a store that has since gone out of business when I was a single woman down in Southern California, called Fresh and Easy. What I really liked about it was that they sold individual servings, so I could decide, I want fish today, I want shrimp today, I want a piece of steak. And I didn't have to buy something that was a package that was too big. I could buy a single size, I can go get some veggies, and I can make myself a dinner. And I had just the right amount. I really liked it. It was fresh and easy. It turns out that they would gas their meat, and that would make it last longer. So when you looked at it, it looked good and red and healthy, and that steak looked amazing. Well, it turns out that the steak had actually already turned bad in some of the cases. It's just that the gas caused it to keep looking like it was good.
So let me pile onto that story, because quite a few years ago, I started looking at grocery stores and populations. Just for whatever reason, I'm thinking, how the heck are we feeding everybody? There has to be some new system that is keeping this food looking fresh, because you had fruit and vegetables coming out when they would ordinarily be out of season and they look brand new. Not that, okay, they're being grown in hothouses. Nope, can't be. There's not enough hothouses. And lo and behold, a story pops up on the news of all these warehouses that are out in the desert that they store all these vegetables and fruits in, and they pump them full of an inert gas, and that creates a fruit and vegetable that will last twice as long as normal.
So now, keeping it going, they say chickens are the gateway drug to conspiracy theories about our food supply, and I'm starting to believe it. Are you going to cluck like a chicken?
I almost did. I'll let it go.
But what has Bill Gates done? He has invested in a company called Appeal, and it coats the outside of vegetables like think apples. So, and you can't wash it off, and it makes it basically keep longer. But you have to eat that coating because it won't come off. So the new gas is this Appeal coating, among others. But yes, they are changing our food supply, and we're supposed to believe that our food is totally cool because they tell us it's better for us.
Well, yes, and unfortunately, I got two things for that. You look at the sheer amount of people in the world now. They have to do something to sustain everybody, or they have to create things like COVID to wipe out part of the population to keep things sustainable for a majority of the masses. That's why I think this thing was originally designed it was coded to go after old people and people that had, as they called them, comorbidities. I 100% believe now that this was a designer drug per se to wipe out part of the population, and it almost did as advertised. Number two, the second part of the study that this scientist noted was non-organic strawberries. Okay? And they couldn't corroborate this because he didn't do the study. This is a study that he followed, though, is they were able to juice some non-organic strawberries, and they extracted enough pesticide out of them to in turn spray another field
with pesticide.
Now, is it true? Don't know. Could he corroborate it? No, he was willing to start a study to see if he could duplicate it. But if that's in fact true, are we really overspraying strawberries, or is the organic organization trying to make organic strawberries and organic fruit look more sustainable and healthier than non-organic? Because I have a hard time believing that a traditional farmer would go out of his way to overspray and try to kill his consumer, because without the consumer of his product, there is no farmer. Period. There is no farmer making money. And if he's overspraying it, he's eating his product unless he has a whole separate field that he's feeding his family with. So it makes you wonder, truth and fact versus fiction.
Definitely does.
Here's something I want to hit on so I don't forget, because I told my significant other that if I don't start talking about it today, I will forget to do the research so I can come back next week or the week after that and talk about it, which was something I heard that was paralleled into these two studies, is a study by Bayer. And I don't know if they call themselves Bayer Aspirin, Bayer Corporation, legitimately how long they've been around, if they were really affiliated with Hitler. The story told by a doctor was twofold. One, that during World War II, Bayer was doing studies on medications and looking for volunteers, and were able to talk Hitler into providing Bayer with 150 perfectly healthy Jewish women that ended up dying at the very beginning of the study, and they asked for more, and they were provided with more. Now, this is coming from a top podcast site, and when I say top, the person has millions of followers. So if it's not true, he would have stopped it right in its tracks. So I will have to dive into it to see if that fact is true. And the other fact was in the early 80s, when AIDS became a big problem, that they being Bayer, introduced something into a medication that caused thousands of people to be more susceptible and to contract the AIDS virus. And then they split not the cure, but the treatment medication by region. And the people that they infected overseas, they gave them inferior medication to try, while in the western half of the world, they gave them superior drugs. Now that I haven't forgotten it, Andrew, please remind me that I need to do research to find out if this is a legitimate story. If they are in fact legitimate, then that scares the heck out of me because, number one, now I am a statistic in the U.S. that I am a heart patient that has to rely on a couple of medications that Big Pharma has invented. Is it good for me? Is it safe? Is it really doing what it's supposed to? Should I be taking it? Number one. Number two, when they were pushing, they being Big Pharma, pushing all these COVID shots, were they legitimate or were they doing another German World War II Hitler type study on people around the world? Just a thought.
Just as a side, our medications are supposed to be, blind trials and all of that. But with that, it is the companies that are doing the trials and then reporting to the government and then the government giving the okay or not. And as far as vaccines, the government knew a long time ago that vaccines had really bad outcomes, but they said according to the government, we need these, we have to have these anyway. So they created a caveat or carve out to vaccine manufacturers in that they cannot be sued when there's a bad outcome to taking their shot. So there is stuff we know and stuff we don't know. So that will be interesting to see where their history does in fact lie. Because we do know that they are given special treatment and special status. And we do also know that they have paid out a lot of money when they knowingly put things on the market that had bad outcomes, but they thought that it was worth a risk.
Ooh, hang on here. So here's one article I just popped up, and I will verify the authenticity. This one is from Friday, 23 May 2003. A division of the German pharmaceutical company Bayer knowingly sold blood clotting agents infected with HIV to Asia and Latin America months after withdrawing them from Europe and the U.S.
Oh, so they just turned around, took the drugs, and gave it to somebody else quietly? How lovely.
The German group Bayer and 3 other labs will pay tens of millions of euros to hemophiliacs who accuse them of having sold in the 1980s blood products contaminated with HIV. So apparently, it's true
that they were willing to do that. So on a more personal note, something for my family and friends is the last year and a half has been very difficult. We have had a lot happen within our family, within our friends, and the end of 2023 was no exception. And I am just prayerful for all of my friends and family. It has been a very difficult year and a half. And I pray that 2024 brings about positiveness, fruitfulness, love, joy, a just a wonderful walk with God. I know not everyone is religious, but I do pray for everyone that this year will be a much better year.
And me as well. I'm praying a lot that 2024 is a much better year than the last 61 years. No, I'm just kidding. The last 18 months. I'm trying to throw a little humor in there to make you smile a little bit. Losing friends and family is so difficult. And it's so difficult because the pain never ends. You lose people. Years ago, I lost my favorite aunt when I was 15 years old. She was 32 years old, just turning 33. And she's one of the ones that not a day goes by when I'm looking at restaurant food, or because she lived in Kentucky until she got cancer and she was a waitress. And every time I see food, smell food, look at a restaurant, I think of Aunt Sandy, and I think of all the fun things we did when she was here in California for a very short time. And that was one of the times in my life that I was still thinking about church. I still believed in God. And that was such a gut punch. I walked away from all of that and said, I can't believe that God could punish a person like that, because I didn't understand. I didn't know what I didn't know. And then fast forward 40 some years. Now I'm a more mature adult, 61. I'm back in church. My beautiful little niece, she was the very first one that I changed a diaper for a baby. Very first one. But you know what? She was one of the most beautiful things that God ever put on this planet. And now I have a different approach, because I'm not walking away. I'm getting closer to God, to Jesus. And I know that all of us will see her someday, and everybody that isn't religious but kind of leans that direction, just make sure no matter what your religion is or you want it to be, you get your mind right. So this relative that you're missing severely, at some point in time, you will see them. Love you, Nick.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.